Hey guys, Ranger James here with Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. I am standing here in the saddle between Big Kennesaw and Little Kennesaw. Behind me you can see Big Kennesaw rising up to your left, and also a splendid layout of fall colors and Atlanta in the distance. November is Native American Heritage Month, and so this is the first of several videos that we're going to be posting just talking about the history of Native Americans in the greater Cobb County area. What is in a name? Well, it may surprise you to find out that many places in Georgia still carry Native American names, and here we have a few. Amicalola Falls is a Cherokee word meaning tumbling waters. Appalachian is a Creek word which means people on the other side or highland farmer. Chattahoochee is a Lower Creek dialect word meaning marked rock or picture rocks. And Yona is a Cherokee word meaning bear. And finally, there's Kennesaw. Well, where does Kennesaw get its name? Surprisingly, there's a lot of different explanations as to how Kennesaw came to be what it is. The first one that's widely recognized by the Park Service is that it's sort of a corruption of the word Kennesaw, which is thought to be a Cherokee word meaning sacred burial place. There's also one mention of the Creek word Kennesaw, which means hog-nosed skunk, which doesn't exist in this part of Georgia anymore. However, a long time ago would have been prevalent in the area. Maybe it was the name of the tribe that was here, known as the hog-nosed skunk, or maybe it was named after that particular animal that would have been seen in the area. But we have further evidence to conclude that Kennesaw was actually the name of a person. It may have been a Creek chief whose original Native American name has several variations, but eventually is anglicized to become Kennesaw. And to back this up, we have a couple pieces of evidence, each being rated around 20 years apart. For one, we have a poem that was published in a September 26, 1849 issue of the Charleston Courier. And even though this is, again, published about 20 years after the removal of the Native Americans from this area, it really goes to show that there was a local legend here that began to spread until it eventually reached the ears of the editor. And it's going to go something like this. Kennesaw. Tradition relates that the Bold Kennesaw, a tribe of fierce Creeks, ruled without right or law. And Nimrod was he of the forest of pride, no hunter so swift as to keep by his side. And whether the season was mild, hot, or raw, still hunted with ardor the Bold Kennesaw. One day to an oak did the Indians repair, under Kennesaw's lead to hunt the wild deer. As usual he flew like an arrow ahead, and soon a fine stag lay transfixed and dead. All hunters were laggard, unskillful and raw, compared with their chieftain, the Bold Kennesaw. The antlers he tore from the head of the deer, and on his own brow as a trophy did rear. In love with this antic he swelled high with pride, as prancing he clambered the steep mountainside. As dust in the balance, as peacock or daw, stood all of his tribe before Bold Kennesaw. When, through the green forest, the horns did protrude, the Creeks, they believed, was a stag in the wood. And one the most wily, an arrow he sped, and the Bold Kennesaw lay clasped with the dead. The Indians rejoiced when released from their awe, they heard the death rattle of the Bold Kennesaw. The false-hearted Creek, who the fatal bow drew, well knew 'twas no deer, but his chief that he slew. So fierce was his rigor, so iron his sway, the love of his warriors had seen its last day. He ruled without right, he ruled without law, and such was the fate of the Bold Kennesaw. And lo, in the wigwam of dead Kennesaw, there mopes with her papoose his desolate squaw. Crazed at his sad fate, with shrill scream and loud shriek, she leaps with her child into yonder deep creek. Thus death did engulf in its ravenous maw the bold chief of the Creeks, his papoose and squaw. At midnight, when tempests bestride the high peak, Kennesaw is haunted by the ghost of the creek. He stalks too in darkness and glides by moonlight, and still drops his heart's blood on Kennesaw's height. And lo, the sad wail of his papoose and squaw joins the voice of the storm on bleak Kennesaw. Now that's one account. 20 years later, you have to imagine a lot's happening in these 20 years. In fact, In 1869, a gentleman comes to Kennesaw Mountain for a picnic, and he draws a sketch and he talks about the origins of this place. And again, 1869, that's right at about 5 years after the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. He comes here September 25th, 1869, which is almost 20 years to the day of the previous release that I just read. And what he has to say, what he's been told about the origins of Kennesaw Mountain, sort of a line, but what he goes on to say is, Kennesaw was the chief of a tribe of Indians who lived in the vicinity of the mountain. Leaving his wigwam one morning for his accustomed bear hunt, he had proceeded some distance up the mountain when he threw over him a bear skin and seated himself by a large rock. And there sat viewing the country around, little dreaming that this would be his last look on his beautiful mountain home. It seems that another of the same tribe had also gone for a bear hunt. Kennesaw watched the dark form creeping towards him, while the keen eye of the Indian was all the while fixed on the crouching form in the shadow of the huge rock that partly concealed him from view. Each was now intent on securing his prize, and Kennesaw had aimed his arrow and was in the act of pulling the string when the keen dart from another arrow pierced his heart, and he fell with the lifeblood flowing from his heart. The dusky figure that had so cautiously crept towards him now threw aside his covering of skin, bent over the form, weltering in blood, and in wild agony exclaimed, "Kennesaw, Kennesaw, my beloved chief, and have I taken your life blood?" But there came no sound from the lips of the chief, for Kennesaw was dead. They gathered around him all the tribe, and laid their beloved chief to rest on the spot where he had fallen, burying him with his tomahawk, beads, bow, and arrow, and all that he valued in life. For the said Kennesaw will want them in the happy hunting ground. Then Kennesaw's only son, young Asanula, the future chief, went roaming the mountain over in his wild agony, and they called it after the Indian chief Kennesaw, called in English Kennesaw. Years have passed since then, and the red man wanders no more over the mountain heights. Every trace of the rude wigwam is gone, and yonder little city looms up before us, almost concealed in the forest of green. But here still stands the large gray rock where the Indian chief fell. It was amusing to see the children so intent in the search for Kennesaw's grave. They discovered in their search a large rock with letters cut onto it. This they supposed must be the Indian's grave, and they came running to inform me that they had found the spot where Kennesaw was buried under a large rock. Indulging their childish belief, I went with them, seeming as confident as they were that I was going to the old chief's grave. One of them had found some of his bones even. Another had discovered the blood on the spot where he was killed, while still another said that there was something written about him on a big rock, meant as a tombstone. They had discovered bones of some kind, but if they were human ones, were more inclined to believe that there are those some poor soldier, whose dust perchance now mingles with the mountain earth. And what they had supposed was an Indian epitaph was but the name of some poor soldier rudely cut on the stone. I could distinctly trace the name H.R. Hunter, the year 1865, but the month I could not decipher, only the date 19th. There were still other letters too faint to be traced out, yet there seemed to me a history written in the few words roughly traced on that old gray rock. And this was written in a September 25th, 1869 edition of a magazine known as Banner of the South, which was based in Augusta, Georgia. This information, I'd like to point out, was compiled largely by the hard work of volunteer and historians, the Bramlett family, so I'd like to kind of give them a shout out here. What is the actual origin of the name Kennesaw? Truth be told, we may never know. It could be any of these three things. It could be a fourth sort of origin that we have yet to discover. But the important thing is when you come here to Kennesaw Mountain, to be cognizant of the ancient ground that you're wandering, and to realize that even though it saw a lot of bloodshed and a lot of death, and there was a lot going on with the Civil War, that it has a rich history stretching back thousands of years with the people that would have come before. With Kennesaw Mountain, this is James Pratt.